interview. Okay,
Got it.
everything worked well. So, how are you? How was your day? How was your art? Everything?
Well, it's morning here in Seattle,
I
so
know. Mm-hmm.
we're just getting everybody's getting up and moving around. But
Awesome. Mm,
it's been the weather's been absolutely beautiful here, and
mm,
this is interesting time of the year. Um, the sun doesn't stay up all day and all night, so
mm.
and we typically get a lot of rains that come in. So these days like this are numbered, man, and we're like,
Oh my
you
God.
know, today
Yeah,
for
awesome.
yeah,
Awesome. Wow,
yeah,
nice to you. So, should we start or interview?
yeah.
Any
Let's
question
do it.
one?
Let's do
Okay.
it.
A music interview with Terminus Void. And question number one. So, my first question I want to ask you, how do you start your journey as electronic music composer?
Oh wow. So I mean that's kind
You
of a
can you
loaded
can give me
question.
I mean small answer because I know you have
Right.
a lot
I
journey.
I think Omar, to answer that, I have to go back to um I really have to go back 40 something years back into the 80s when I first heard electronic music.
So
It
in
was
80s you're starting as electronic music composer, right?
well, it was 1983. It was the winter of 83. We've got a syndicated radio program that just came on the air nationally, Heart Space. Everyone knows it. And it was February of 1983. And the first time I heard this electronic music in the program, I was absolutely blown away. And um, it was almost like a religious experience, man. I can't even explain it. I was a teenager at the time. It was, rock and roll was the thing.
Yeah,
And
nice.
Sunday night, I think it was close to midnight. This
Mm.
program comes on with Stephen Hill, and some of those tracks. Brian Eno was one of the first tracks I heard. Steve Roach. Um,
The Roach.
Never heard anything like this, and it just it just really kind of hit my soul. And so, how I get inspired today, um, I heard that. Now, ironically, I never picked up a synthesizer until 2021. Yeah, so it's only been about 3 years. A lot of
Wow.
people are shocked at that because they listen to this music, but I tell them, I said, I've had electronic music in my head for over 40 years, and it's just been waiting to come out, And so, back to your question about being inspired, that's the core of my inspiration, came from
That's
those
core of your
early years.
inspiration. Mm.
Um, you know, when we listen to this music, I think universally I can say this, it takes the listener on a journey. And so
Of course.
it takes you out of whatever element or whatever situation you're in. And for the time that you're listening to that music, you're just anywhere. I mean, you're in the stars or wherever your mind takes you.
Yes, I
And
test that because
so,
I just enter your channel. I listen to a lot of your tracks. Unbelievable sound.
yeah, yeah. I
Yes.
typically on those first two albums, those were auditory journeys, and especially the second album, Origins Unknown, which I've got some really good news about that album. But that was a um, concept album that really tells a story. And so when I compose, I typically will have a vision in my mind as far as the story that I want to tell auditorily. And that's a big, big part of my compositions. Now, with that
Of
said,
course.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So that's your answer of the first question, right?
Right.
It's nice, nice, really nice. Of course, you have long, long journey and like electronic music and ambient. Because
Right.
I see you create a lot of ambient tracks in your channel, Specialty Space Ambient, my favorite. And I hear your sound take me to another dimension. Always I
Right.
enter your channel and I listen to your music. Awesome. So let's jump to another question. So how do you discover your particular sound? That's my second question. How you discover your sound, your
Right.
tone?
Right. So, in the early on the first album,
Mm,
um, and that album was actually when I created that, I did it for myself. I had no intention on really getting into music in any depth. And um, the uh, there was a critic in New York that had just by chance heard it and reached out. He said, "Man, you need to get this." And I told him the story with Hearts of Space and Stephen Hill and that big influence. And he's like, "You got to get it over there." And I resisted for a long time because I was like, "It's not good enough." And ironically, I submitted that. I want to say early part of October of
mm,
2021, and I believe it was first or second week of November. I'm listening on the radio, and
mm.
Steve Hill announces J. Ronald Smith Terminus Void, and I like it blew me away. And after that, a couple weeks later, I got a call from Don Tyler down in Los Angeles, and he was interested on bringing Terminus Void onto the label. And I resisted because I didn't feel that I found Terminus Void or myself. I didn't find the voice yet, right? And that was a very difficult journey because, again, I've got 40 years of music in my head. However, I wanted to create my own uh, voice, if you will. And so to find that, and I've had this discussion with a lot of artists, and it's not like you can put your finger on it. You know it when you
Yes, you're
hear it.
right. You're right.
You absolutely know it when you hear it. You also know it when you don't hear it. And there was a lot of that in the very beginning because I was getting contacted by other artists and labels, and there was all this interest, and I just wasn't quite ready to release on a label. And so at the bottom, at the end of the day, there were really three voices that Terminus Void was speaking, and it was ambient space music. It was very uh, cinematographic type of music, and also there was a lot of sequencing, which listening to Klaus Schultz for a long time.
Mm.
I really had an affinity for the Berlin School, and so the challenge becomes, what's that first album that you put out on a label? And I had to be very careful because if I were to go with all space ambient or all Berlin School, and then the next album that comes out, the listener might be taken off guard because they were used to one voice. And
Which
so,
genre I want to play? Which genre I want to play? There's a lot.
right, I like to merge everything though. So, and that's where
No,
a
but it's
period,
hard, to merge everything.
yeah, yeah. But if it can be done, it's a very unique sound. And
Of course.
The Apeiron album, which was the first to be released on Groove, was a culmination of three different projects in each of those genres. And so the next album that comes out or the following, I'm not going to throw anyone off guard, right? So, I've actually have about three projects I'm working on right now. Um, the second album, Origins Unknown, um,
Mm.
is going to be re-released on Groove. We're going to do a label release on that. Hopefully by the end of the year, I've got some additional music to go on to the album. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, Ron is. in Europe, they still sell a lot of CDs, right? So,
Of
um,
course.
you know, when I was talking to Ron Boots at Groove, and we start talking about doing a re-release, and the consensus was there's a lot of space left. I think that album is about 62 minutes, so there's going to be some additional
Send it
music.
to me. Send it to me. Don't
Yeah,
forget to send it to
absolutely,
me. Yeah.
absolutely,
I will
absolutely. So
travel to another dimension, your sound.
yeah,
You
it's
and Colby Sachs from Dream State Logic, you create
right,
a lot of space ambient,
right. He's,
unbelievable, unbelievable artist.
yeah, he's right here in Seattle. Interesting. Colby and I are working on a project together with Holland Holmes, Dunes
Holland
of Io.
Holmes, I know
Um,
it. It's really
yeah,
interesting artist.
yeah. So him, Dunes of Io, and the Dreamscapist in Australia. We're working on a
Ah, Paul Hida.
yeah, Paul Hader. Yeah, we're
Yes,
working on a
I
joint
know
project.
it.
Um,
I make
I
with
think
him one calibration music.
yeah,
One.
yeah.
Yes,
So hopefully there'll be some announcements on that project soon. It's huge.
of
Um,
course. It's awesome.
yeah,
Looking
we're all
forward to hear that project. Looking forward,
right, right.
of course. Awesome. Okay, let's jump to another question. So, question three, which approach do you follow?
Which approach, as far as compositions? Um, oh yeah, I'll tell you. And this is another one of those things where artists get together and it's frustrating. So typically, um, I'll have a concept together, and like I said, I don't focus on one project. I usually have I like to have about three different projects going on at the same time. When I do compositions, I will just sit back here and let it go, let it flow, and just produce concept tracks. And, I think on Origins, there were about 27 tracks that I produced for that album. I think eight of them made it on it. Appear on, right? I had over 40 tracks that I composed to a concept level before we produced that album. And I think, again, there's, I think, 11 tracks on that album. So usually what I will do is I'll have a concept, a story, an inspiration, something that will start that creative process. And then I just let my mind roll and I will get into that mode. Um, it can last weeks, it can last months, right? I don't put a limit on myself. I let the music dictate where it goes when it's released. Um, I think this is some of the frustration I think artists have with labels too. Is sometimes you get the label pushing you, when's your next album out, or what do you got going on? I tend to resist that and say, I'll have it when it tells me it's ready to go. Um, Once I have all these compositions together, I'll typically pick, a good handful of those to fully develop.
Hmm.
Once they're composed, I've got them down. Then I start moving into the soundscapes. Um, the A lot of people think that the Appear On album is um, in Atmos. A lot of people know I'm recording in Atmos now. That album is actually not, but I spend a lot of time in the sound creation, the spattle sound creation. Um, I use just a lot of different type of filters, a lot of custom things that I've built. But I'll record those in a Atmos environment, and then typically I'll down um, uh, mix those down into a um, just a binaural track, if you will. So that's typically the process that I follow. And then again, I mean, all of it when you listen to these tracks again, you just know. I don't know. I have no way to explain this process, but um, I just hear it, right? I'll hear this is right, this is wrong, and once I get to that point, then I'll shelf the track for 2 weeks, a month,
Mm.
um, get fresh ears on it, and then listen to it again. And that's typically when I do kind of my final tweaks of how I want that to sound, or how I want this this synthesizer to move in this environment. Um, so yeah, it's a bit of a drawn out process. It takes a bit of time, um, but I think
Long
at the end,
approach.
yeah, and I think
Long
at the end of
approach. Yeah.
yeah, I try to produce something that
Mm.
is going to be new. It's going to be fresh. To me, it's very important that every track contributes to an album as a whole. My music typically is what I call deep listening, and every track does play a part. It's very difficult to listen to just one track of an album or two tracks. It doesn't produce that same effect. It's like from the beginning to the end, you'll hear a lot of tie-ins. There's a lot of complexity as far as tie-ins between those tracks. So yeah, it's a bit of a drawn process, but I think at the end of the day, it really um, produces something that is quite unique and special.
Awesome. No talking. Long
Yeah,
approach you have, JB.
yeah,
Long
yeah.
approach. So, another question. What gear do you use in studio and live when you go live performance and in your studio? I mean, your gears. Can you give me some overview, quick overview about your gears?
Right, right. So typically, and this was kind of what I was getting to. This is a studio setup that I use. This
I know.
particular setup. While I'm doing this, going back to the Piron album and Ron, when that released, Ron called me. He was like, "We've got to get you over here to do some live performances." That's one thing I love about Groove is they put on at least two shows. They sponsor a lot of concerts, but they put on two big festivals each year in the Netherlands. And Ron was begging me to come because I do go to Europe quite often. And I was very hesitant because I said, Ron, look, um, for example, on the Piron album, there are on some of those tracks, I've got like, if we were to break those tracks down, I've got on some of those over 50 layers of tracks. And out of those 50 plus, there's a big handful of those that are multi tracks as well. And I said, I can't put my head around taking an album like Appearon and bringing it live. I don't know that it can be done. Holland Holmes and I had this discussion quite a bit, as long as well as Colby over at Dreamstick Logic. And
Yeah, I invited him to my channel for make a
right,
podcast.
right. So what I decided was, you know what, I'm going to reconfigure my studio for a live setup, which I've done. And I'm just going to start composing music that can be very, it's organic. It can be played relatively easy on stage. So once I get this down, and I'm considering doing some. Martin Stusler does a lot of live concerts on YouTube, and Martin was here over the summer on vacation. We spent some time together and talked about this, and um, I think I may end up doing a couple live concerts on YouTube next year, and then look at doing some European tours over there with Groove and Ron Boots. As far as my setup, I don't think much is going to change from now and then. I've got a one of Quantum that is an absolute um, dream to work with. It's unbelievable, the capabilities. Of course, I carry the Prophet as well, and then a handful of VSTs, which I use depending on which album. I'll choose a couple different VSTs for that program.
Hmm.
I use that a lot for sequencing as well. Um,
Yes.
yeah, but the Quantum I would say is kind of my flagship go-to. It's very dynamic, and just the amount of tweaking that people say sometimes they criticize it that it's got too much to offer and it's very complex. But if you narrow your focus and you know what you want, it's one of those synthesizers that will deliver that sound that you're looking for. You just got to find it. If you find it, it can definitely do it.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Wow. Such interesting artist you are, Jay. Awesome.
Thank
Your
you.
journey, your music, your studio, your art, everything. Not talking. So, another question. Who would you most like to collaborate with?
Ah, wow. Another loaded question.
Uh,
Yeah. So I would
give
say,
me a few artists for the time. Give
yeah,
me maybe
yeah,
one, two.
yeah.
That's okay.
Um, I'd love to work with Steve Roach. No
Oh my
doubt about
God, my favorite is Steve Roach.
it.
I want to meet him
Steve,
one day.
yeah, he is phenomenal.
Uh,
I've listened to Steve's
he's a
music.
genius of ambient, a genius
Yeah,
of ambient.
yeah, yeah. I've been listening to Steve. Steve was one of those artists that inspired me back in '83.
Me too. Me too.
And I've always I've always loved the work that he's done. I had an opportunity to sit down with Steve in 2022 at
Do
his
you meet him in
concert.
reality? Do you meet him in reality?
Yes,
Maybe you and him sit together talking about ambient electronic, something
yeah,
else you can
I
see.
first met Steve in Tucson at the his hometown concert in 2021, 2022. Take it back, it was
Mm,
2022 in the fall.
yep.
And
Awesome.
then I met Steve here. He was in Seattle um, for a concert last spring with Colby and I. We went up there and met with Steve after the concert for a bit. Um, we were the project that Colby and Holland and Dunes of Io and Paul Hedron are working on. Um, Steve had interest in that project. His schedule, I don't think could fit our timeline, but we're hoping that eventually we can bring Steve into that project. So this may happen one day, but it would be awesome. I'd love to work with Steve Roach, hands down.
Yeah. He
Yeah,
inspired me a lot. 2014 when I discovered the electronic music. Yes, Steve Roach. A lot of albums he great. His sound is really mind blowing. I
yeah,
maybe one day I want to meet him in my podcast. It's
yeah,
such a dream,
yeah.
you know. Steve Roach.
He is one of those. He is one of those artists that, for him, it comes from within. He's.
I want to know his journey, his
Oh my
approach,
God.
everything.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And that goes back. I mean, that goes back to the early '70s. I
Thank
think
you.
he moved to LA in about '72, somewhere around there. And that's really kind of, I think, where he really hit the scene. But Steve is one of those innovators, and he's certainly um, going to be. I mean, he is. As we lost um, like Vangelis and Schultze, uh, that next generation that filled those voids. I mean, that's Steve's hometown right there, man. I mean, he's one of those icons in the electronic music world. Um, you know, talking about those artists that you wish you could have played. I'd love to, I'd love, and I think a lot of people would have loved to work with Vangelis. Um, One person I never met. Now Ron Boots with Groove knew Vangelis, and if we were 10 years or 15 years past 10 in time, I mean, it would have been awesome to be able to even
Mm.
meet him, let alone work with him. But um, you know, these guys and Schultz, another one. I mean, these guys are the inspiration, I think, for a lot of artists. You know, not just myself, but there's a lot of artists out there.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, and without those guys and people like Stephen Hill, Hearts of Space, and your show, I mean, um, we need you guys to get our music out. It's really really difficult
Also
to
to play electronic music for specialty in my country. When I discovered it in 2014, it's really awesome to discover the electronic music because for me, electronic music is the future. I love
oh yeah
ambient, I love
yeah
space ambient, everything,
yeah
everything.
talking about the future of electronic music. I mean, that's where Atmos, I think. um, I was talking with Howard Gibbons over at Spotted Peccary several years ago about this, and uh, I was listening to some music from Michael Jarre, and he started producing his music in this Atmos environment. And I um, I used to spend a lot of time in nature recording binaural recordings, and so I was very accustomed to three-dimensional sounds and working to um, utilize that in audio recordings. And so when Atmos came available, um, I was very intrigued by it. It was very difficult in the early years to get it because there was no DAW that worked directly with it. You had to work with Dolby software, and it integrated, and it was very sloppy and very complex. And then when my DAW that I use is Studio One, and when Presonus integrated Atmos, I was like, this is a no brainer. And ever since that integration, everything I've been producing is coming out in Atmos. So, talking about the future of electronic music, I think out of all the genres of music that's out there, electronic music has the most, I think, to gain by the Atmos environment because, we talk about journeys. We talk about taking people on journeys with electronic music, and you put your headphones on, and I typically listen with blindfolds on. I mean, I um, really focus on deep listening, and I let that music move, and stereoscopically, left to right channels. You can do a lot, but
Mm.
imagine taking a synthesizer and moving it purposefully around a three-dimensional, environment, and it's just the possibilities are just enormous. And um, I think in that sense, there's going to be once it gets more integrated and people embrace it a bit more. I know Apple has integrated their phones with Atmos, and it's not the true 7.1.2 or 9.1.2, but it's pretty darn close, and it does um, create a sound that you just can't get any way else. So I think as that technology develops and there's more people that are accessing this, it's I think Atmos is going to play a huge role
Wow.
in electronic music, and not to mention, I think also with um, video games and um, film.
Yes, you're
I'm
right.
I'm
A lot of
I'm
video
starting.
games play electronic music, specialty dark ambient and space
Yeah,
ambient. A lot of games.
yeah. I've got some independent film projects that I'm working on. I've done a few over in Europe this past year for independent film, and I'd love to get my music more into the film industry, gaming industry. And to do that, it's got to be an Atmos bed. I mean, even, I think video games require it. A lot of film studios require it. So it's going to be a technology that I think um, makes sense to embrace it. But if you want to get into those avenues for your music, you're absolutely going to have to learn that technology and incorporate it in your music. So,
Awesome. It's maybe the best interview ever. This interview would be in my memory, So,
I,
um, we just have 7 minutes. We can make another call, right? We have
sure.
maybe four questions. Okay. So, another question. What's next for you as an artist?
Oh, there's always
You
something
can
on
give
the
me
horizon.
short. You can give me short, not long.
Sure, sure. I've got, like I said, I typically work on several different projects at the same time. I've got a lot of different things going on.
Mm,
I the most recent project which will come out is the re-release of Origins Unknown. I've got several new tracks that'll be on that, and that'll be released through Groove. Don't have a date yet, but I'm pretty certain it's going to be at the end of the year, if not the very beginning of next year.
mm,
And then I've got a two other albums. I believe we'll release two albums next year on top of that re-release. Um, One will be a ambient, um, very ambient project. The other one will have a lot of that Berlin School sequencing that's reminiscent of the Apeiron album that came out this past year. So in the short term, that's what I've got going on. Outside of that, again, I'm working on some music for film. We've got a multi-artist project that will come out, which we'll have some announcements of that at the end of the year as well. And I'm also working on a documentary. So um, yeah, lots going on. A lot of going.
Okay. A lot of informations, a lot
Yeah,
of things next year. Yeah. So,
great times for sure.
and another question. What is that you learn as a musician from each new album that you compose and record?
So this is one reason why when I hear from the label or sometimes some reviewers will call me, "What do you got working on? When is it coming out?" I tend
Yeah.
not to I tend not to do two things. I tend not to share when things are going to be done, and I don't typically share my music until it's completed. The reason for that, like I said, with the Atmos environment, and that is a huge learning curve. Just the way that you listen to music and the way that you conceive it is a lot different than a stereoscopic field. So with that, there's a lot of technical aspects as well. I do a lot of uh, custom reverbs that I build, which are um, they're a lot different than the traditional reverbs, and you have to build them in such a way because of the Atmos environment. So I'm constantly learning new techniques, and when I learn something, I go back to maybe a track that I completed 3 months ago and say, "Oh, I can use that and apply it." So I'm constantly learning. I'm going back, reapplying these skills to some of the completed tracks that I've done. And then on a
Mm,
broader sense, um, when I have an album, like I've got an album that's ready to go right now, but I'm holding it back because there's things that I'm learning that I can go back and apply to that. So I'm kind of in one of these processes right now where I'm in this learning curve. So I'm holding back a lot of my albums, a lot of my music, and applying that knowledge on those. So to answer the question, it's again, it's that process that I'm in when I compose. It's very liquid, it's very fluid. So, and it's also very difficult to say, okay, I've got to let this one go. It's one of those things where um, you learn the skill and then you go back and apply it back to some unreleased project. So that's kind of where I've been going lately. I think I'm just about there though. So hopefully by the end of the year, I'm going to have a lot of um, new material coming out. That's why I say I think there's going to be at least 2 albums coming out next year, and that's really the main reason is I've been holding off uh, as I'm learning these new skills to apply. So
Wow. Wow, Jay. A lot of things. So, my last question. Any advice for those looking to start producing electronic music? Is there a particular setup or process that may help others?
so yeah, and I've had this question a few times,
Yeah.
and I'll get people that will reach out to me and say, your music is inspiring, and I'd love to do what you do, or I'm trying, or I'm struggling, and I've actually spent some time with a couple individuals that have reached out, and there's a couple different takes to this question because it's can be an inspirational thing, it can be a technical thing. Um, I think first off, my first bit of advice would be is create this music for yourself. Okay. Um, when I was approached by labels, and certainly when I got on Groove, um, all of a sudden it's like everything changed. It's like, oh my God, it's like this is the real deal. And there's now these labels that have, you know, Groove has just a tremendous pedigree about itself. I mean, they've got on their catalog some tremendous artists, and when you become a part of that, it's like you feel this pressure. It's like, okay, I've got to make sure what I put out there that people are actually going to listen to it, and that's a mistake. That's a mistake. I think a lot of young artists will, or new artists will get into that mindset, and it's very destructive because to produce this music, I mean, you're an artist yourself, so you understand this. It really has to come from within, and it has
Yes.
to be. You have to have this connection. It's very difficult to explain, but when you're in that space, you're in that space. And so, to me, that's number one. That has to be the motivation of why you're producing this music. Has to be the first question I think an artist has to ask themselves, um, and that has to be the driving force. If not, I think you'll be able to create music, but you're not going to be able to create that emotional connection. And if you can't do it, your listeners certainly aren't going to be able to do it. Um, One thing that I attempt to do in everything that I create is my goal is for you as a listener to be able to feel that emotional feeling that I get when I hear this music for the first time come out of my mind, right? It's like what I'm experiencing emotionally, I try to convey that to you. And so
Yes, you hear my
that,
music. I send you some of my links.
yeah, man. I mean, I get it. And to me, that has to happen. And if it doesn't, you're going to be one of thousands of artists out there because it's a very crowded field. And to me, the music that works, the music that
Yes, I try
is,
my best. I'm just the only artist here. Play everything by myself.
yeah, yeah.
Nice, great.
So that has to be the forefront. Beyond that, then it becomes a technical thing. And there's a lot of people from the on the technical side of it. They'll crank up the reverbs, they'll crank up their delays, and then they'll start playing. And like, oh my God, this is great. And from a technical perspective, I typically will compose everything without any filters. If it doesn't sound right to me without delays and without
Reverb, EQ or
reverb
something.
and EQ and compression or cutoff, all those things. If it doesn't sound right without it, it's not going to sound right with it, right? And especially, like I said, I work in the Atmos environment, and Atmos is very, very, very sensitive to reverbs and delays, compression, especially compression and EQ. Things can get very muddied very quickly. So you do need to understand, depending on the environment that you're working in, you do need to understand a few concepts of how the technology is going to respond to a reverb or a delay. Um, I am completely self-taught. That is
So you
probably,
self-taught,
oh, absolutely, man.
self-taught artist.
Yes. And you'd be amazed. There are a lot, I'm not going to name them, but there are a lot of major artists um, who
Never
are
study in
absolutely
academy or in
no,
institute
no,
ever.
no.
Me too. Yeah.
And I think I used to see that as a disadvantage, but I think that is a huge advantage, not just for me, but for all self-taught artists out there, because we don't work in we have no boundaries, right? We have no um, the first album and even the second album, the way that I use half notes and um, I've had uh, musically trained people tell me you can't do that. You can't play like this. Well, you
Um,
can. And to me, again, it goes back to that emotion. I like to convey emotion through my style of playing, the use of half notes, um, and I do it in such a way that is not conventional. And I think that if I was self-taught, I would have never discovered that. And I've had critics who've really just are very very difficult. Uh, listen to it and say, this works. It works. So going back to that question, I tell people too, because I get this. People say, I'd love to play music, but I've never learned to play. I don't know what notes I'm in. I've never played a piano. It doesn't matter. It's if you hear it, and I'm very fortunate in the fact that I truly can hear music in my head, right? And I can transpose that from my mind to a keyboard bed, even
yeah.
though even though it's been just a few years. My experience with keyboards. I played piano as a kid. I self-taught, um, but prior to 2021, I was probably a teenager, right, when I sat down to a piano. Uh, yeah, my first synth was my Prophet, and that was
Prophet
just a few years ago, right?
is a good
So
synthesizer.
yeah, oh man, I love it. I love the Prophet. I love that analog sound. That's Steve Roach is to blame for that,
I
man. I
wish
mean,
one day that Iraq may be available to selling a synthesizer or specialize with synthesizers, electronic, whatever.
yeah, and it's that's the thing with virtual instruments. Um, Anyone with a passion can get into the music. The big question is,
Yeah.
is can you make the impact? And again, how to do that is produce that music for yourself first, above all, and
Mm.
secondly, um, compose from the heart. If you don't compose from the heart, you're not going to be able to convey that emotion. And a good piece in my world, a good electronic piece will convey not just a story, but the emotions that go with it. So that would be my advice. That would be my advice.
Such a great advice, Jay. Such a great. You are great. You're a great man. But I'm
Thank you.
amazed you're a self-taught artist. Me too, I'm a self-taught.
Like I
So,
said, you'd be absolutely amazed. And there are artists. I've been fortunate to talk to a lot of what I would call A-list artists out there that um, have told me, they felt like frauds because they would play live, and they said, they couldn't even tell you what key they were playing in. There are artists today that are very, very well known, um, that not only can't tell you what key they're in, but they really don't care because it doesn't matter. It's again,
It's
you
coming
are
from
going.
heart. I think the sound coming
Yeah,
from heart
yeah,
from there because
absolutely.
there's emotion.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of electronic artists, um, we have this bond. We
Yeah.
we speak this certain language that a lot of people have never heard, um, and that language conveys a lot of emotion in it, a tremendous amount of emotion. It's interesting. When I was, like I said, I experienced electronic music in the early '80s, and when I go back and think about those times, it's interesting for me, um, when I think about some of the best years when I was in high school or a teenager. I always tie it to the music that was playing at the time. I've always thought uh, in terms of music. It's very interesting, and
Yeah. It's
for
really
me,
interesting
yeah,
you, Jay. Really
for me,
interesting you are.
I was going to say for me, it just my entire world is built around this auditory experience and the emotions that, like I said, it goes back to '83. Those emotions that I felt listening to Steve Roach and Brian Eno, and Vangelis and Klaus Schulze. Um, it's like, man, that was so powerful, and that's what I want to convey to you through my music. And again, going back to what I would recommend for a new artist or emerging artist, find that emotion and find a way to get it out of your head onto a keyboard and into your listeners' ears. And that's, to me, that's the success of it all. It's being able to pull someone out of a bad environment or a bad situation that they're in, if only for 70 minutes, on one of my albums, to be able to pull you out of that environment and give you a sense of escape. It's a powerful tool. Um, and if you approach your compositions as an artist, from that perspective, you're going to be successful, absolutely successful in what you do.
I will try my best. Thanks for a
Yeah.
great advice. Great, great advice, Jay. Yes, I try my best with electronic, with my journal, with my ambient. Even yes, I have very minimal gears, not a lot,
Yeah.
but I do
Yeah.
my best. I love
Oh,
ambient. I try always to make. Maybe
good.
may make some weirdy things, but I try always to improve myself because electronic music is a long journey. It's not easy to maybe become professional,
Yeah.
or you can say like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And man, I've listened to a lot of your music. I know you
Yeah.
hear it for free, and
Yes.
it's
Bandcamp blocked my country, so I can't sell my
yeah,
music.
yeah,
Too
that's so
bad.
important.
Yeah.
That's one thing,
It's
it's
okay. I'm happy to make music.
one thing, Omar, I love about what I do is you know, music transcends everything in my world. Um, you can reach people all over the globe. I mean, there's so much um, strife going on right now, and it's like we all this music just transcends all of that, and we make these connections, these emotional connections. Man, that is so powerful. It is so powerful,
Yep.
and just like with your music, I mean, um,
You
I
hear some
can.
of my music in Bandcamp, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got quite a bit, and like I said, I'm a very deep listener. I'll put my iPads on and put my earbuds on, and it just takes you to a whole nother world. And to me, that's what it's about, man. It's about that emotional journey that we can
Yeah.
share with.
I try always to build my world inside the sound.
Yeah, it's
I try
definitely,
always.
it gives you a sense of escapism for sure. I mean, and I think this world needs that right now. We all need a break from the chaos that's going on everywhere, and to be able to offer that, it's very powerful. I'll get emails from listeners, just like a lot of our artists in our genre will get, and they'll say, I'm going through this tough time, whether it's a personal experience or a cultural experience that's going on in a certain part of the world. And, for that 70 minutes, man, you allowed me to escape that. And that is like the biggest compliment that I can even imagine to receive is to be able to give someone a sense of peace or um, journey is so powerful in my world. And that's what motivates me a lot of times. I know I create music for myself, but I know that if I do it right, um, it's going to touch people's lives, and it's a very powerful thing. Um, very hard
Yeah.
to describe, but it's an honor to be able to do that for people, and I think that's what every artist should strive for. Is
Find yourself inside my sound.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very difficult to explain, but man, when you're there and you're in that pipeline,
I
man,
listen I listen to a lot of your tracks.
yeah,
I take a lot of deep breath and it's just amazing.
yeah, they're very, like I said, a lot of my stuff is very cinematic.
Yes, I hear
Uh,
that.
the new material coming out is very much so.
I
It's got
test
that.
it with my headphone, with my AirPod.
Yeah, nice,
Awesome. Yes, I enjoy the journey always. Even I share your music with some of my friends,
nice.
and yes, he like your music.
I've got, one reason I went with the Groove label in Europe is because um, I've got a pretty solid following here in the States, but man, I've got a European following in Eastern European, um, the Middle East, Russia. I hear from people from Russia, listeners from Russia quite often. And, you know, it's awesome to be able to create something right here and
Yeah.
share it around the
To
world. I
this
mean, it's,
universe, everyone can listen to your sound, to your message, to dive
yeah.
into your sound. Awesome. You do a great job.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's my greatest honor to see you for real.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming, Omar.
Yes, yes. It's a
Talking for
long
quite a while.
time. It's a long time we never been talk.
I'd love to meet you in person one time, maybe
Well,
in your home
that's
country.
that's
Or
my that's my dream to meet you in reality, to talk to
yeah,
you, talk your music. It's such
yeah.
a dream.
I do get to
Yeah.
Europe quite a bit, so like I said, Ron has uh, gave me an open invitation to the concerts there in the Netherlands, and um,
Oh,
I've got to, like I said, it's a lot of work preparing for live shows, but once I get that down, man, I definitely will get over there. And also, I'll mention Colby because Dream State Logic, he travels the world, and
well,
so we should all get together and maybe put some music together while we're all in the same room. That would be
yeah.
awesome.
I wish one day that I can make a project with Colby in the future or in my dream. It's such a great, you know, to meet
Collaborations.
Colby Sachs from
Yeah,
from Dream State. I invited him to my channel, so he don't have time. So maybe one day I will meet him.
absolutely. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I love collaborating. I've done quite a few. I did, I think, two last year. One with Mina in Serbia. She is such a talented artist, and I was honored to work on one of her albums. Um, but yeah, man, I think in the community, it's like we share a lot of music. I know
Yeah.
I share music, things that I'm working on with Holland and um, um, Colby. I share things, and we'll get feedback from one another. And sometimes I'll get a track from an artist, and I'll just it just comes naturally, man. I'll lay down a lead for them, and I'll just shoot it back, and I do those typically to inspire. It's like, this is what I hear. This
Yeah.
is my interpretation, and maybe that inspires them to do something. But every now and then, I'll get an email back and I'm like, "Hey, can we do a collaboration?" I did some work with Pat Kista recently, so his next album coming out will be on. course, he was featured on Appear On this past year. So
Mhm.
um, yeah, collaborations, man, they just come naturally.
Yes, I
I
make
think
a
so.
collaboration with Paul Hedan, with Cedric Ferment, yes, some of the artists I make collaborate with Sophie Janine. I wish one day that I make a collaborate with you, you know. It's
Hey,
awesome.
open invitation. Whenever you're ready, you let me know. We'll
Oh
do
my
it
God.
because I'm.
It's my greatest honor.
I think your style of music and mine, um, we're on that same we're on that same level, that same frequency, and I think our music would
Yes.
work well together. So whenever
Yes,
you're
one
ready,
day
you
we
let
will
me know.
make it. We will make it together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. Appreciate it for the interview, for your answers, for your long journey. You inspire me a lot. I wish
Well,
one day I can meet you in reality,
yeah.
Joe. You are
Well,
a mind-blowing artist.
let's plan on it. Let's plan on it.
Yeah. Keep making music, my friend. And I will keep
Oh,
making music.
every day,
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah. Awesome. If you need anything, just drop me a message. I will be always there.
I will do it. You as well. You as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate
Well,
it for your time,
yeah.
for your
Well, thank you
day.
for.
Thank you
I was gonna
so
say,
much. It's my honor to meet you for real. Yes, I'm really happy.
yeah, mine
Today
as
it's
well.
great. Yeah.
I appreciate this.
So
This is awesome.
thank you so much for everything, Jay.
Very good. Well, thank
Keep
you.
making art. Yeah.
Yes.
Until
Yes.
the next time. Yeah. Do you
Okay.
have any
All right.
question before we finish the interview? Any question to ask me?
Like I said, all I'd say is thank you for taking the time out, sharing my journey with
Thank
your
you so
listeners.
much. Thank you so
It's,
much.
it's very
Really, you love
honorable.
your music, you love your art, and yes, love everything you did.
Nice. Very good.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Until the next time. Thank you so much. See you.
Bye bye.
Bye.